Hello, today we're looking at the Lab 2 solution. I'm going to go fast. This is a YouTube video, so you can pause it, you can rewind it. I'm just trying to not make this go any longer than it needs to. So we begin by looking at payments. So this is a classic example of a PMT function. It's classic in every way. So the PMT function is under the financial group. Scroll on down. So I'm going to use cell references. That is important. So for rate, I'm going to point to the rate. Divide it by 12 because there's 12 months in a year. Now I'm going to point to years, multiply that by 12, head on down to the last field, and point to amount. Notice cell references, I'm not hard coding in numbers like 100,000. You can get away with it here, but it's definitely not advisable, and it will come back to bite you sooner than later. So just always cell references, and you'll be in good shape. These are all pretty brutally repetitive. Divide by 12, years, times 12, amount, nothing. Alright, and one last time. Here's my rate, divide by 12, here's my years, times 12, and here's my amount. Notice these 12s are coming from the monthly payment, right? If this is a quarterly payment, then these become 4s, or whatever the payment, whatever the interval may be. Right, so that is PMT. Let's head over to GAOL SEEK. So GAOL SEEK is one of those things which is not really emphasized by your book, but I think it's an important one. So a GAOL SEEK starts with a function. So this just happens to be a future value function. So let's hit into financial. Future value is FV. FV is set up exactly the same as a PMT. So I'll take my rate. I will divide that by 12 because these are monthly contributions. There's my years times 12, and there's my amount. Right, so if you know PMT, you know future value. All right, and so I get a number like $16,555. So this is a GAOL SEEK question. So I'm saying how long would I have to save, or how long would I need to keep doing what I'm doing to get to $1 million? This might be depressing. So a GAOL SEEK starts with a function. So I click on a cell with a function, head over to the data tab, head over to what if analysis. Then I click on GAOL SEEK, and I get this little guy. So set cell B6, that is the cell I'm messing with, to value. So I want it to be $1 million. Now that's not going to work unless I put a negative sign in front of it. So whatever you're seeking needs to have the same sign as what you started with. And the variable in this scenario is years because it says years. So I'm going to point to years. Weird little dialog box to set up. I click OK. And OK. Notice when you get pound signs, that means you need to widen the column. And so this would take me a shade under 65 years, right? I said it might be depressing, and that is. All right, on to LPGA 1. So here we're going to insert a function which returns under if the player's total score is 215 or less. Otherwise, we're going to return over. So this is an if function. So I'm going to head up here. That should be widened. So the if function is formulas. It's under logical. So if total score is less than 215, then under, otherwise over. Notice those quotes just get put in there automatically after I enter the data. I click OK. This player was under, that's good. I double click the fill handle. This looks like an issue, but if you look, it's actually sorted, so that's actually correct. It eventually flips right there, and that looks like the correct place, right? Always worth checking, at least a little bit. On to LPGA 2. Insert a function that will return the word winner. So it's winner or not winner. I wanted to write loser, but I felt like that was a bad thing to write, so I didn't write it. Here we're looking at under 72 in round 3. So here we are, another if function. If round 3 is under 72, winner, otherwise not winner, right? Another classic example of an if. I click OK, fill handle, and wow, a lot of winners. I guess that's good news for everybody, right? Next sheet, insert a function which will return the average total score for players who scored under par in round 1, so less than 72 in round 1. This sounds a little bit like an if. It's not an if. It sounds a little bit like an average. It's not an average, it's an average if. And if you've been paying attention to my tutorials for the week, you know it's an average ifs. Alright, so this is under more function statistical. I'm going to go average ifs. So you want the average of the total score. So I'm going to select that column. Now the criteria range means a column, is round 1. So one of these is round 1. These are kind of annoying because you have to scroll a lot, but that's just kind of the way it is. And my criteria is less than 72. So it's this weird kind of half inequality, just like it is every other time. I click OK, and I get a value like that. And I don't know if that's right. That's one of the tough things about these if class functions, is that you don't really know if they're right at this point. And here, insert a function in the yellow cell, which will sum the winnings of all players who scored less than par in round 3. So this is similar to the last one. When we want to sum, this is going to be a Sumif. So we want to add up the winnings, and we're looking at round 3. So the tough thing about Sumif, I mean, it's not really tough, but it's under a different group, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it is. It's under the math and trig group. So I want the sum of the winnings. And my criteria is round 3. Less than 72. So this has a lot in common with the last problem, but it's a different function and it has some different columns. I click OK and I get something like that. Again, it's hard to tell whether it's true. Just got to trust that it is. On to the next one. So this is a pretty big sheet. This is a combination of VLOOKUPs and Countifs. So I'm going to start with the lookup portion here. So I want to look up these grades in this table. So that's going to be a VLOOKUP because this is a vertical table. So VLOOKUP, so I'm looking up that value in this table. Always place an absolute reference on that table, and I want column 2, 1, 2. Usually is 2. This fourth field here, because I'm looking up numbers, I can leave it blank, or I can put a 1 in there. I'm just going to leave it blank. I fill handle down, and it all works the way it's supposed to. If it breaks on a fill handle, then it means you forgot your absolute reference on the table. It's just something you should always do. Now, these right here are Countifs. So I'm saying how many students got an A, how many students got a B, how many students got a C. This is a good example of Countifs. Now I'm going to do this the shortcut way, just because I don't want to do any more examples of these than I have to. So I'm going to head to Statistical Countifs. So little trick right here. I imagine you wouldn't do it this way, but I'm just showing you you can. So criteria range. In other words, where do I want to look? Notice for every one of these things, these functions here, I'm going to be looking at the same range. And since I'm going to do kind of a shortcut here, I'm going to use an absolute reference on that range. And my criteria I'm looking for is A, right? So I'm looking in this range for the letter A, is another way of writing what I just wrote. Click OK and I get something like that. I'm going to fill handle it and it works. Like I said, I imagine that you probably did not fill handle it, but you can. Let's see what happens, right? I looked for the red thing in the blue range. Oops. I looked for the red thing in the blue range. I looked for the red thing in the blue range. So you can see how I used an absolute reference to lock that fixed range into place. All right. On to the next one, salaries. All right, so this is a good example of those if functions again. So how many physicians on there? I like this one because you have to think for yourself a little bit more than some of those others. So this sounds like a Countifs to me. So let's see what we can do here. So so where do I want to look for physicians? Well, that's going to be this range right here, and I'm looking for physician. I'm just going to point at physician. Right, and it tells me there are 4 physicians. Average physician salary, that sounds like an Averageifs. So what do I want the average of? I want the average of salary. Now, what's my determining column? It's job title. And in the job title category, or column, I want to look for physicians. And I get something like that. Total medical assistant salaries, that sounds like a Sumif, which is under math and trig. Now, if you're wondering how do I just know all the functions, well, you've really got to read the questions. Yeah, I did create the worksheet, but really what we're practicing when we're doing this is practicing choosing the appropriate function. And only through doing it enough do you really realize how to do this. Okay, so we're almost done. Those are some ifs. I like those. Those are good questions. On to golf. So golf, this is a subtotal question. So this is again one of those things which isn't particularly in the weekly reading, but I made a video on it and you should be pretty decent at this by the point. If this is the first time you've seen this, then you need to review the materials for the week. So subtotaling begins with sorting. So you got to ask yourself, what am I grouping by? Well, I'm grouping by country. So that means you need to sort this by country. I'm going to do that with filters. Whether you do it in ascending or descending doesn't matter. Once you've sorted by the thing you're going to group by, now you're set for a subtotal, which is under the Data tab. Each change in means, what am I grouping it by? Country. I want the sum of winnings, and so those just happen to be checked already. And this is a good example of subtotals, right? This tells me that all the players from Canada combined to win that much money, right? Japan, there they are. This is a pretty nice little set to subtotal. On to the last one. This looks like it's about conditional formatting. Conditional formatting is something we talked about last week, but it's also one of those things which you need to practice it, otherwise you might forget it. So I want to apply the 3 triangles conditional formatting to the today column. Reverse the order, that's the hard part. Alright, so today, conditional formatting, we need to highlight the range first. Now we go to conditional formatting, which is under conditional formatting under the home tab. It's an icon set. 3 triangles is that one, which you probably would never guess. But I didn't reverse it, right? What's with this reverse part? Well, let's see. So I've already applied something. I'm just going to go manage rules. Let's edit this thing and see if we can figure out what we want to do. Sure enough, there's a button right here for reverse icon order. There's other ways we could have done this, probably more efficient ways we could have done this. But I don't know, I think the way I did it is most consistent with the way I wrote it here. Filter, so we only want to see players from Japan, so filters under the Data tab. Here's filters, here's country. There's a lot of ways we could do this. I'm typically not an advocate of just checking the box, but here it's just so easy. Let's go ahead and do that. So notice that's a filter, right? I didn't delete a bunch of rows. Oh, also notice that when I filtered rows, my instructions went away. That's just a problem. That just happens. That's not really intentional. There's not a whole lot I can do to fix that. But that is my trick. No, I will typically... Your directions should never completely disappear on you. Usually there will be a piece of them, and you can click on the area and they show up, or you can resize the text box. You shouldn't run into that, but in the event you do. Additionally, I always write the questions such that the filter part is the last part, so just in case your instructions do disappear on you, it shouldn't cause you to miss anything on the sheet. So that's the lab. A lot of concepts in there. As you can see, we're really starting to cover some ground, and the Excel exam is going to be coming up in a couple weeks here, so make sure that you are very familiar with everything that was in this lab. And so if you're looking at this lab and you're thinking, where did this come from? I feel like I need more practice with this. Well, that's what the weekly activities are for, right? Like these things here. That's where I'm trying to give you some practice with this. So if it's the first time you see any of this, then please review these and review the videos at the bottom of the week. Thanks for watching.